Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the Advances in Drug Discovery and Development 2023. My name is George Hammond, and I'm here to moderate today's event alongside my colleagues Princess Sennett, Elizabeth Bowen, and Gemma Seabrook. Before we start the talks today, I just have some general information and a few tips for getting the most out of the event. We would like to ask if you could please refrain from video, audio, or photo recording of all talks. Many of our speakers have kindly agreed to share their slides with you, and these are available within the literature section on the platform. Please remember that we encourage debate and discussion and welcome all of you to use our networking services to introduce yourselves to other attendees, but we do not permit the overt solicitation of products or services and reserve the right to block any user who infringes on this rule. It's also incredibly important to say that this event was only made possible thanks to the generosity of our sponsors and partners, particularly our technology spotlight sponsors Evotech, SciEx, Synfigo, and Thermo Fisher Scientific. For more detailed instructions on how to make the most of the features available to you at the event, please navigate to the event home and watch the overview video at the top of the page or visit the FAQ section in the left-hand menu. With that, I will now move on to introduce our keynote session, How Can AI Accelerate Drug Discovery? I am incredibly pleased to welcome Dr. Joshua Smith. Dr. Smith is the global lead for industry partnerships at IBM Research. He received his PhD in electrical engineering from Purdue University in 2011 on a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Award, following the IBM T.J. Watson Research Center as a research staff member. Dr. Smith developed a growing interest in biomedical engineering and biotechnology, and in 2013 he helped establish the Translational Systems Biology and Nanobiotechnology group at IBM Research. After serving as a technical assistant to the Vice President of Healthcare and Life Sciences at IBM Research, he joined the Accelerated Discovery team focused on holistic acceleration of scientific discovery workflows for healthcare and materials research. A very warm welcome to you, Dr. Smith. Following the presentation, we will have a Q&A session and we welcome any questions that you may have. Please ask questions using the Q&A system to the right-hand side of the video player. You can also use this feature to connect with attendees and discuss the talk, so feel free to take advantage of the chat system by introducing yourself and sharing your thoughts during Dr. Smith's presentation. And now, without further ado, I will hand over to Dr. Smith to begin his presentation.
Thank you very much for the very warm introduction and the invitation for being here. I'd like to just start by sort of level setting up front. Today, I'm really going to be speaking about the role of AI in accelerating scientific discovery and, of course, specifically drug discovery. But my talk will go beyond AI alone into the broader role of IT in this regard. And the message I would like to convey really is how technologies like cloud, AI, and quantum are really coming together to deliver transformative value to businesses across industries. And I think, already over the past 60 years, IT has changed the way that we live, the way that we do research, and how we conduct business. It has fundamentally altered our lives. On the other hand, we're living at a time right now when IT is undergoing some really transformational changes that will bring the impact of information technology to a completely different level. Going from something that helps us automate, understand, and optimize things to something that will actually help us create and discover new things. And that's very important because the complexity and scale of the global challenges that we face today are testament to the fact that the urgency of science has never been greater than it is right now. Right? We just come out of, in the recent past, a global pandemic that morphed the way that we work on a global scale and required also at the same time the fast development and delivery of vaccines. So from another pandemic to climate change to food shortages and energy security, these challenges demand that we act with unprecedented agility and speed to find solutions faster. Why? Precisely because these problems are so complex and so interconnected that solutions are non-trivial, typically requiring hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in 10 years or more to reach answers. And I think we might all agree that that's too slow, or at least that we'd like to see that move faster. And we as a society, when we've had these types of problems in the past, have relied on one very important model to solve them. And that, of course, is the scientific method, something we all learned from a very early age. Traditionally, it's been our best model for discovery. The process itself, of course, is very straightforward. We start with a question or problem. Then individuals and communities, they come together and start to study the wealth of knowledge and understanding around the topic, and then use that to form a series of hypotheses needed to run some real-world tests. After experimenting, you of course obtain some results and you assess, meaning that generally you fall into one of two positions after that. Either you've solved the problem, or in most cases, that you now need to iterate many, many times around this loop. The problem in the context I've described, I think, is obvious, and that's that the issue is that when the problems are so complex and are so interconnected, like many of the problems that we face today, it requires significant investment and time to arrive at a solution. So what I'll describe from here is how technology, prominently AI, can be used to accelerate each step of this process. And I would argue that the role of technology has always been critical in exercising this method, right? With each new tool at our disposal, science takes us a step forward in our understanding of the world and improves our ability to drive impact on a grander scale. And the point, again, that I would like to make here is that IT has played a very significant role in this regard. Consider our ability to apply the scientific method 50 years ago and how we're doing it today, and there's absolutely no comparison with how much more effective it's become. And I think, to that point, here are some of the major paradigm shifts that have improved the process of science. And note that from about the 1950s, computers have really given more traditional approaches an enormous boost, allowing us the benefit of simulation and mechanistic models, for example, to help guide discovery. And continuous advancements in high-performance computing, HPC, have enabled modeling and simulation of complex molecules, as a couple of examples. And that has led to today's paradigm of big data-driven science. But even with HPC, the scientific method is still too slow to effectively address some of today's biggest challenges. Again, as evidenced by the fact that it takes so long to arrive at a solution in so many domains. Now, the technologies that we feel will help change that are really summarized here as bits, neurons, and qubits. Bits, of course, representing classical computing, which has been really democratized, making it easier and less expensive to use and send to hybrid cloud environments. This has really brought down the entry point for access to HPC. Neurons, of course, represent AI, which is nothing more than a simulated neural network. AI has arrived at a very strong inflection point, going from models only able to tackle specialized tasks, and that's with a lot of data, a lot of human intervention and annotation, to models that use self-supervised learning and foundation models that integrate knowledge at a completely different level. Qubits, of course, are the transistor equivalent in a quantum computer. And a few years ago, quantum computing was really a dream. Today, it's become a reality. And I think the very interesting thing here is that these technologies, each game-changing in their own right, are reaching inflection points at nearly the same time. And we believe it is the convergence of bits, neurons, and qubits that will ultimately form a new paradigm of computing that will exponentially alter the speed and scale at which we can uncover solutions to complex problems. And this new era is one that we call an era of accelerated discovery, right? Exactly where the synergies and integration of these emerging technologies will come together to accelerate the scientific method, allowing us to glean scientific knowledge at scale and use AI to generate hypotheses and do autonomous testing. So how exactly? With an AI-powered, sort of community-driven approach that transforms the scientific method from this into something more like this, right? It's an approach that leverages combinations of hybrid cloud, AI, and quantum at each step of the process to iterate faster and bring more knowledge, technology, and intelligence to each of those iterations. Now, I'd like to walk through each step and describe how AI can help us, for example, study a problem in a new domain of interest. So after a question around a specific problem has arisen, you need to gather and integrate existing knowledge around a topic. And AI with cloud can help automate this process at scale, incorporating data sets and information from patent databases, research papers, and a lot more. And of course, there's a considerable amount here, far more than any one person or group of people can possibly keep up with. And AI can help, allowing us to extract and integrate this knowledge in a meaningful way. And along these lines, one key capability that we've developed to do this is something that we call deep search. It allows users to ingest, to integrate, to structure, and query against a wide variety of knowledge at scale to gain deeper insights on a particular topic. It does this really by parsing and interpreting and indexing that information and integrating the results into knowledge graphs. Importantly, once that data has been consolidated and extracted, it allows you to run queries against the structured data, essentially enabling users to explore that information without having to read a single paper. So queries such as those shown on the upper right really allow you to do this in a very straightforward way. As highlighted on the bottom of this chart, Deep Search, this tool, it was actually used to develop a COVID-19 corpus back during the pandemic. And there are links here that would allow you to go and learn more about how that was done. It's a technology that's already available today. It's mature, it's starting to be used on the cloud, and it significantly speeds up the first step in the process of scientific discovery by a factor of 1,000x compared to human experts. So after pulling in knowledge around a particular topic, it may often be the case, it is often the case, that information is sparse. In other words, there are a lot of gaps in the knowledge that you care about, or you may have knowledge that is simply not accurate. An often very time-consuming process then is analyzing this knowledge and deciding how to integrate it correctly. We can augment this process by simulating data, creating synthetic data, in other words, to close knowledge gaps. This can provide us with enough accurate data for the properties relevant to a particular problem to then go and now train a downstream generative model. So here in the upper right, our engine is actually using a process called multi-fidelity optimization to determine what type of test and what type of computer resource we need to measure the desired properties that we care about at the lowest cost. So being able to automatically pair the right model with the right infrastructure gives researchers the ability and flexibility to balance speed, cost, and fidelity. AI-enriched simulation also offers something called AI surrogate models, where you essentially approximate the results of what a full-scale simulation would give simply using an AI model. And this allows you to narrow the landscape of candidates to identify, for example, the most promising ones before exploration of those with a full-scale simulation campaign. So basically a course-to-find approach to minimize the use of more intense compute. In a nutshell, we can use AI-enriched modeling and simulation to do the data augmentation necessary to efficiently fill the gaps in our knowledge around a particular problem. And in practice, these approaches have led to speedups of 2 to 40 times compared to more traditional approaches. Now, during the creation of new knowledge to close the gap, I mentioned that there's this problem with respect to accuracy. This is where quantum can really help, right? Because problems connected to accuracy of the knowledge that we do have is in many cases due to the fact that it's very difficult or impossible to run certain types of experiments to directly measure it as what you need. And even if you can run simulations, simulation of the physical world for certain processes has a computational complexity that's too onerous to model realistically. And that's a big problem, right? Because yes, I can close the knowledge gap, but if that simulated data is not accurate, those inaccuracies will propagate downstream, providing ultimately no meaningful value. And this is where quantum computing has the potential to make a big difference, allowing you to go from an exponential combinatorial complexity that you would experience on a classical machine to a polynomial one, meaning that you can make problems that were intractable with classical computers doable on these machines. This will allow us to augment knowledge for very complex problems that are currently outside the scope of what is possible. Among the most exciting of those are probably problems of simulating nature, right? Problems of physics, problems of chemistry, problems of materials will become possible that just aren't now. There's huge potential there, but also for what I'm categorizing as data with structure. And of course, there are certain general optimization problems as well, where you can get these non-exponential speedups, but still advantages. One final word on quantum as a data augmentation tool before I move on. A common question that we get is, okay, but when? And what I can tell you is that about 7-8 years ago, we were doing a lot of research, but there was really nothing that was usable. I mean, we put a few qubits out in the cloud for people to go and test and play with that. But since then, we've gone from that to a real commercial roadmap for quantum computing as shown here. And that every year we've met and released a new chip. And in November of last year, in fact, we released the 433 qubit Osprey processor. This year, we plan to release a quantum processor with more than 1,000 qubits. And from there, we've made an announcement that's really exciting, at least we think it is, that in 2025, we're going to connect quantum with classical systems to create what we're calling a quantum-centric supercomputer. So a lot of exciting stuff happening there. And right now, as shown in this chart, we're just starting to hit an inflection point to show real value for materials design and drug discovery and some of these other domains. I think it's also very important to point out that this roadmap connects with a broad system of ecosystem rather of collaborators and users. In fact, there are currently more than 20 systems on the cloud, over 210 members of the quantum network. There are more than 280 collaborating universities, and we have about 500,000 users that are actually using these systems. And since 7 or 8 years ago, when we started our first machine and put that out, there have been more than 1,750 scientific papers published using results from these machines. So I covered knowledge integration, and I covered AI and quantum enriched simulation to augment that knowledge. I'll bring all this together at the end, I promise. Let me now take some time to step back and speak about AI in general as we move into the topic of generative AI for hypothesis generation, the next step in the scientific method. And perhaps you may agree that the evolution of AI has really been a story of data representations, starting from expert systems where you had handcrafted symbolic representations around the 1980s, moving to machine learning, offering task-specific, but they were still sort of handcrafted representations. Then a very important advancement happened. Deep learning emerged, where we had now task-specific, but learned representations, where data is sent to the machine and it learns the representation on its own. Now we have a new era that's really changing the way that we do things that we've all heard so much about in the past year or so. And that's the era of foundation models, where we have generalizable and adaptable learned representations. So think, OpenAI's GPT-4, upon which ChatGPT it runs. Foundation models are trained on a broad set of data: text, images, speech, structured data, 3D signals, usually at immense scale and in a self-supervised way. And that information, that model can then be quickly adapted to a wide range of downstream tasks. And this era of generative models has really been made possible simply because we now have a much larger set of data and a much larger amount of affordable computing. So rather than having the bespoke models of the past for each individual task, you can now train a general purpose foundation model that can be adapted across a wide range of scenarios and applications with much less effort to create generative models for discovery. So to summarize that, we're moving right from a very hands-on, supervised learning scenario for AI where intensive labeling is required to a self-supervised era that is compute-powered and requires little labeling, which is much more automated and efficient. To highlight the power of foundation models, I'd like to use the example of large language models, again, because it's an example that we all are very familiar with now, which are really just a large neural network that uses deep learning to generate human-like text. And I'd like to walk through an example of how this works, because I think it's instructive for those who are unfamiliar. You essentially take a lot of unlabeled data, meaning text that has not been tagged with labels identifying characteristics, properties, or classifications of that text. And you take billions of unlabeled sentences and you feed them into your neural network model, whose trained objective is to guess the next word. And you could say, well, what's so special about guessing the next word? And the thing about guessing the next word is it's something that you can do with math. And you can measure and optimize to determine how good your neural network is at that task. Of course, you do this many times for those billions of sentences with a variety of texts. And if you do a good enough job at that, well, then you must understand something. And the better you guess the next word, the better you understand, the smarter your neural network becomes. You can then go and communicate with this foundation model, this neural network that's been created. I should underscore that foundation models are raw and unfinished. They're a foundation, they're not a complete house. And there is some labeling that now needs to happen to turn that into an actual downstream application. But those applications can now be realized with a much smaller amount of labeled data. It takes a lot of data to get there to create a foundation model, but once you've done it, you can get there significantly faster and cheaper. And of course, these models are no longer science projects. They're commonplace. They're already finding application everything from customer service to education to human resources, and even more esoteric efforts in things like suicide prevention. Now, I'd like to highlight the fact that transformer models, which form the base for foundation models, they're at the heart of foundation models, are useful for more than just natural language processing or NLP tasks. I've walked through the case for generative AI for NLP, and in language, we have sentences, words, and letters as shown on the left. In organic chemistry, we have analogous constructs in the form of chemical properties and reactions, molecules, and atoms. And we have very simple but effective representations of the molecular structure in text that we call smiles. And if you have the right representations, meaning sufficient, not necessarily the most complex one, but the simplest one that captures the features that are important to you, you can get and train a transformer for organic chemistry, not with petabytes of data, but with a relatively small data set. So you can then take something like 100,000 organic chemistry reactions and get a reasonable model from that. So the net of that is that by training transformers and deep generative models from chemistry data, using the AI tools for language, we can produce the same capability to generate new valuable content in chemistry, useful for discovering, for example, new therapeutics such as vaccines or new sustainable materials for the semiconductor industry. And to this end, we've created what we call the Generative Toolkit for Scientific Discovery, or GT4SD, providing access to generative AI models to accelerate discovery within the domains of chemistry and materials research. And right now it hosts more than 25 pre-trained models for materials design, and it includes prepackaged workflows so that you can retrain them on your own data. Ultimately, the ability to create generative models for a scientific task at scale for a reasonable investment and much faster is what's going to make a difference. This is the reason why we've spent a lot of time within IBM Research, not only trying to develop the next model, but also to create a library and a toolkit that we've put out into the open source space to facilitate the creation of generative models for science. And what this helps you do, as shown here, is to train the generative models, to create inference pipelines that you need to generate hypotheses, and then run them in an effective way. So once you've gathered the knowledge, you've cleaned it, you can then use generative models to automatically generate hypotheses that are now more trustworthy and therefore more valuable at scale. Okay, up until now, I've really focused on 3 steps of the scientific method and how AI can accelerate them. Those are knowledge integration, AI and quantum-enabled simulation to augment existing data, and hypothesis generation. The last piece is that once you have your hypothesis about a target molecule candidate, for example, you need to actually go and synthesize it. Now, if you have 2 molecules, that's a relatively easy task to undertake. But if you want to automate that, and you want to screen 100 or 1,000 molecules or more and do it quickly, then AI, cloud, and automation can help significantly. How? To that end, we built a capability that we call collectively RxN, the capabilities that are shown here. And in the first step, you could start by using AI to train a model that allows you to predict the outcome of a chemical reaction. So in other words, you can do chemical reaction prediction in the forward and reverse directions. So it allows you to do, in other words, as shown here, synthesis and retrosynthesis. In a second step, you can also simply click and get all of the procedures necessary to carry out these reactions in the lab. In other words, you can cut and paste out of a paper, a paragraph, put it in there, and the model will actually give you step by step what you need to do in order to synthesize these molecules in practice. Now, once you've done that, as shown in step 3, you can even send it out to an automated laboratory that does the synthesis and analysis for you, allowing you to do this virtually from any laptop in the world. We call these capabilities, again, collectively RxN for chemistry. Together, they demonstrate how you can really close the loop, because it's not just about the end automation, that's step 3. It's also using AI to do the ideation and creation of the synthetic steps that you need to get there. And this is something that we also created and tested. It's out there on the cloud. Today, it enjoys more than 30,000 global users. It's been used to generate more than 8 million reaction predictions and has a growing ecosystem. So putting this all together, we started with the scientific method and its associated steps. And the message I've tried to convey today is that AI, hybrid cloud, and quantum are coming together to accelerate the gathering and sourcing of information in this process. So to summarize, of course, once you integrate knowledge around a problem using AI, you can then use AI and quantum to augment that knowledge. And once you have knowledge that is or data that is good enough, you can train generative models at scale to create hypotheses. And once you have a series of virtual hypotheses, you can then use AI and cloud again together with automated laboratories. And this allows you to accelerate each step in a very effective and substantial way, which I've described. For example, knowledge ingestion enhanced by 3 orders of magnitude. Data augmentation through AI can increase the process. And these are numbers from actual in practice work that we've done with partners, anywhere from 2 to 40 times. You can get a 10x enhancement in hypothesis generation and 100 times speed up on the back end testing. Overall, including bottlenecks, you can accelerate the entire flow, the entire process by a net factor of something like 10x. And that's huge. Getting a result in 1 year instead of 10, especially during something like a pandemic, for example, is critical. And you can find more information on all 4 tools available at accelerate.science. There you'll find additional information, free version access to some of these tools, open source toolkits, quick start guides, and links to scientific papers published on each. Now, up until now, I've really only described technology. Having done that, I'd like to now take you through a real-world example where these technologies have been applied to actually achieve this type of accelerated discovery in different domains, everything from materials discovery to drug discovery. The first application we applied this to where we felt we could make a big difference is in the realm of materials discovery. And why materials discovery? 2 main reasons. First, from a technology viewpoint, the knowledge integration and augmentation, the generative modeling, et cetera, is more mature in this domain. And second, it's a field that if you're really able to speed up, as I show here, by a factor of 10x in time and cost, it serves as a solid proof point that you can really have impact on some of the major societal problems I discussed at the outset of my talk. Now, being a computing company, one of the most interesting material challenges that you have connected to semiconductors is finding a new set of photoresist polymers called photoacid generators, or PAGs. These are the light-sensitive polymers used to spin coat onto wafers that you use to pattern devices and circuits on chips fabricated on wafers like the one that you see here. And IBM invented these PAGs some 30 plus years ago, and they work really well, but the problem is they're not so environmentally friendly. So we wanted to try and rectify that in a project that we called Project Photoresist. The goal here was to discover a new photoacid generator molecule for more sustainable manufacturing of semiconductors, and to do it much more efficiently by complementing human expertise using the AI tools I've described. And for reference, this is something that you usually need about 10 years and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment to actually achieve. So let's break it down into the components of materials discovery workflow. First, we use that tool that I mentioned called Deep Search, where we integrated papers and patents using the Deep Search engine and used it to structure knowledge from 6,000 papers, which it accomplished in about an hour. This allowed us to create sets of known PAG families represented in the center of this circular dendrogram with the gray branches that represent all of the existing compounds, the existing PAGs found in the literature. Now, some of the properties that we care about for more sustainable PAGs were reported there. Things like biodegradability, the absorption, in other words, the ability to be photoactive, and the toxicity. As you can see, many compounds in the center, but for the properties that we care about for our new problem of finding environmentally friendly PAGs, there's not a lot of knowledge. That is to say, there are quite a few knowledge gaps in the properties that we care about, as indicated by the sort of sparse colored spikes that are sort of jutting out from the outer rings, extending from the known PAG families. So what do we want to do? We want to fill those gaps. We want enough accurate knowledge about the properties that we care about so that we can actually train reliably a generative model. So the next thing that we did was augment the existing knowledge with AI. That was done using, in this case, Bayesian optimization. This allowed us to reduce the required number of simulations significantly. Essentially, we used quantum mechanics to look at the optical properties of photoacid generator molecules, and then ran physiochemical models to understand the toxicology and environmental impact these reported molecules might have, even though those properties weren't reported. Now, each one of those simulations could take up to days on a supercomputer, but with AI-enriched simulation methods, as shown here, the number of full-scale simulations needed were reduced by 60%. Using AI, then, you're able to quickly close the knowledge gaps in the properties that you care about much faster. Once you've augmented the knowledge, you can then use that to create generative models to generate hypotheses. Basically, simulate candidate materials not yet reported, which are represented here in black. How? The structured property data in this case was used to train a generative AI model to identify structural rules that make the structure distinct from other materials, where they at the same time also needed to satisfy certain properties of energy gap, properties of toxicity, biodegradation rate, light sensitivity, etc. The result in this case was more than 3,000 candidate materials generated using the tool for only 6 hours. Zooming in a bit from those hypotheses, you can then go in and identify new molecules that can readily be synthesized with the improved sustainable qualities that you care about. Finally, the generated candidates were sent to an autonomous lab to carry the forward synthesis to produce the chemicals of interest using RxN to close that loop. Using this process full cycle, we were able to find a few new materials actually of this type with the right properties that are eco-compatible in only 10 months' time. And to reemphasize, again, this is normally a 10-year molecular discovery process without AI, without HPC, without robotic labs, reduced to just 10 months. And sustainable semiconductor materials discovery is really just one of a growing pool of use cases. With other partners on the therapeutics front, we've been able to create antimicrobial compounds in 48 days instead of the normal 2 to 4 years it takes. Here, we utilized our generative modeling toolkit, molecular dynamics simulations, and combined them in this case with traditional laboratory synthesis and testing methods. But this is a case where the deep generative models screen for a number of features, and molecular dynamics simulations were then used to confirm mode of action. And this represents something like a 15 to 30 times speed up in time to result. On the front of green chemistry, in an effort to make the chemical products that we consume every day more sustainable, one solution might be the use of enzymes to lower the energy consumption or the amount of polluting solvents required to make them. And currently, adoption of this approach for industrial use is hampered by difficulty in choosing the right enzyme for the right chemical process. So here, we built a machine learning model trained with publicly available patent data to help scientists predict which enzymes could be suitable replacements for a given reaction. It's the sort of work that we're doing with RxN, expanding its capabilities to include a new tool to facilitate the use of enzymes for more environmentally friendly chemistries. And lastly, we also have a big partnership to discover new molecular candidates for CO2 separation, where in here 500 molecular candidates were discovered for membranes to better separate CO2 from flue gas using the deep search engine combined with generative AI. So these are just a few examples of the things that we're doing broadly to demonstrate the power of AI in scientific discovery across domains. Now, obviously, a question of particular relevance to the audience today is, okay, how do we apply AI to achieve acceleration in drug discovery? And we're all very familiar with the overall drug discovery process, which is shown in the upper left. Here, the colored arrows going from left to right show some of the activity that the teams within IBM Research have been active in during past years, asking, what does data and technology enable us to do better? Or, where does it allow us to achieve some acceleration in the flow? And on the right, there are corresponding lists of select recent publications where AI has been applied in these areas to show evidence of acceleration. And many of these use cases examples have been done in conjunction with collaborators and key anchor partners that work with us to test and improve these technologies. On the bottom left, you see some of the drug discovery specific tooling that has come out of those efforts, available as open source tools. And to be clear, in these cases, these are early stage research tools. They're not products, but nonetheless, they are demonstrations of places where we have learned enough to be able to externalize the AI. And because we're working with a large external community, it serves very well, of course, to put these tools out there, and many of them have found adoption. Now, today, I'm actually going to focus more emphatically on the therapeutic side, looking at the things like molecule generation, but there's also some tooling and expertise that we've had in the past that is relevant to biomarker discovery that's represented here among the select publications. One very big, it's a 10-year partnership actually in the area of drug discovery is with Cleveland Clinic on the research side. And just to give you an idea of this scale and degree of depth, we actually just did a ribbon cutting on the first IBM quantum computer installed at a non-IBM location at Cleveland Clinic back in March. This is a collaboration with the Lerner Institute at Cleveland Clinic, where we're really achieving the sort of discovery acceleration that I began this talk with. And here we partner with them deeply, bringing technology like the ones I've described to bear on problems that they pick to work on, and then use that to achieve some type of acceleration, the type that I've been talking about. On the bottom right is just one example of this. It's a project that we've been executing on together over the past 12 plus months to discover novel cancer therapies. The problem statement in this case is wrapped around T-cell receptor recognition and antibody design, and we're using generative AI methods to help achieve that. This is one of dozens of individual projects within various stages of execution. They're actively going on right now with the clinic. Now, I've talked about foundation models, describing them as generalizable and adaptable learned representations. And here I'm simply punctuating the benefits of that. Again, prior work done in machine learning would look something like what you see on the left, task-specific AI, where you start with raw data, you train a model, you apply that very well-trained model to a single task. But of course, when you want to start on another task, you need to start from scratch again with that whole process. With a foundation model, on the other hand, as shown on the right, you actually do a lot of pre-training that is task independent, and then those representations become generally available and usable for a broad variety of downstream tasks. And as I've described, there is the opportunity, of course, to do something task specific, and there's some fine tuning that happens there, but this now requires a much smaller level of effort, yielding the benefits listed on the right-hand column. So you actually gain a lot by taking the time to do the pre-training of the foundation model. And this is how really all foundation model techniques have really enabled a huge acceleration advantage already. And we're bringing that to bear in the biomedical domain. The real strength of what we're exercising here is being able to build foundation models across different modalities of data. So not just language representation, it's all the modalities of data that everyone here is familiar with, whether that's sequences of genes and proteins, whether it's structures, whether it's expression activity or other assays. All of these data modalities can be brought into the foundation model. Here are the relevant modalities as shown on the left as various omics data as one example. Represented schematically, this gives you an example of the breadth that we're already able to span. Now, these modalities of data are already being used by those working in this space, by those here at this conference, to achieve some level of integration of that data today. Pursuing a foundation model approach allows us to integrate that data and achieve multimodal representation, as shown in the middle, that gets us closer and closer to the biological phenomenon. And that's really the goal here, right? To actually recapitulate as much as possible the distinctions and nuances that exist in biology, to tune it to the disease biology, to tune it to the compound specificity, to tune it to the assay data that you're getting. And the pre-trained models, they're built with that entirety of knowledge. You augment that with that AI-enhanced simulation to generate synthetic data. And in the molecular space, for example, you can do free energy perturbation studies. You can do molecular dynamics trajectories to understand protein-protein interactions. And you can bring those to bear because they are very exquisite. And usually it's not possible to capture that experimentally, to capture the needed level of intricacy to capture the phenomenon that you care about. A second technique that we're using is actually AI surrogates. I touched on those a little bit before for things that are mechanistically not possible to understand, but are just really laborious to produce. So AI techniques, that can approximate, in other words, surrogate fashion, represent these phenomena that we bring into the pre-trained model. The output of these foundation models can then be fine-tuned to the tasks shown in the box to the right, whether it's to target discovery or to generate new small molecules or biologics. Antibodies in particular is something that we're very active in working on. And lastly, AI can be used to predict the activity or use the phenotype that is generated to then fine-tune or refine the model back again. So the AI techniques to actually do the model enhancement is also an area that we're working with that we call hybrid AI. It's sort of like a hybrid between a mechanistic model and an AI model, combining the two to do parameter estimation, to do the phenotype prediction with a combination of AI and simulations. So those are a few of the things that we're doing in the biomedical space with foundation models, but just closing more generally on foundation models. For anyone who's played with ChatGPT or Bing Chat AI, for example, I think we can all viscerally feel that these are useful tools, that they're different and emergent, and they've certainly changed the conversation in a major way about AI across domains, right? Including drug discovery. And within that, there's what I would call the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so in the current state of play, right, there's the good. And there are two examples of Microsoft's Bing Chat AI generating both stylistic text as well as code. Now, I assume that we've all played with these again and seen them do remarkable things, not just fun things, but also practical things like the coding example you see here. That's the good, but of course, there's also the bad. So it's not to say, right, that this is the end of the story, that we've now found we have artificially sentient systems. These systems still make mistakes a lot, and it can be difficult to tell when they are versus giving correct facts. So Google back in February, right, famously lost $100 billion in market cap when their BARD system on Lambda made a very obvious sort of factual error in its maiden demo. And there's an article here from The Atlantic, queuing off the fact that these systems often are making mistakes, but sounding very intelligent and like they're telling the truth. On top of that, of course, there's the ugly. It's been well documented that these systems have all kinds of implicit biases. So here's an article of a system that had a high propensity for racism and bias. There are also examples of translators with gender bias, translating from languages like Hungarian, which doesn't have gender pronouns, to English that does. You end up getting things like, he's an engineer, he's a doctor, she is a nurse. So you see the gender bias start to creep in. In a nutshell, I still believe, generative AI holds enormous potential to create new capabilities and value for enterprise. However, it can also introduce new risks, whether they be legal, financial, or reputational. In addition to incorrect information, sometimes called hallucinations and bias, generative models can also inadvertently ingest information that's either personal or copyrighted as part of their training data, and then output that later, creating unique challenges for privacy and intellectual property laws. So to address these risks and bring flexibility, governance, and trust to enterprises, IBM actually recently announced back in May during the Think event the creation of our new integrated data and AI platform called watsonx. Now, whether someone uses IBM or any of the other tools that are out there, I truly believe that foundation models will be a key driver for digital transformation across every industry in the future. And I think one piece of advice offered by Dario Gil, the director of IBM Research at that Think event, was don't just be an AI user, be an AI value creator. And what he meant by that is, as an AI user, you are limited to just prompting someone else's AI model, and you have no control really over the model or the data that's been used to train it. There's no visibility there. As an AI value creator, on the other hand, you have multiple entry points. You can bring your own data and AI models, or choose from a library of tools and technologies, or combine them. You can train and influence training. You can tune. You can have transparency and control over the governing data in AI models. And of course, you can prompt it as well. So instead of just also having one model, you have a family of foundation models and other machine learning models, which you can improve and make your own. I won't go into depth here. It consists of the three parts shown here, which are watsonx.data, watsonx.ai, and watsonx.governance, which provides a powerful set of tools to ensure that your AI is executing responsibly. what we and others are building, takes the complexity of the process away so that enterprises really only have to worry about creating value for their businesses. And here are just a few examples of our current partners that are bringing the value of AI to their businesses. I won't go through each of these, but as a few examples, SAP is going to use the IBM Watson capabilities to power its digital assistant and their SAP solutions. Moderna is applying IBM's foundation models to help predict potential mRNA medicines. NASA, for example, is using our language models together with geospatial models that we've created with them to improve our scientific understanding in response to Earth and climate-related issues. Wix is another example. They're using foundation models to gain insights around customer care to better meet the needs of their customers. So generally speaking, I would certainly encourage you, whether with IBM or others, to join them as part of your own digital transformation and really embrace the age of value creation using AI. And with that, I thank you very much for your attention, and I welcome any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith, for your incredibly insightful presentation. That was truly a great way to kick off this online symposium. As of all the other talks, we are likely going to have lots of questions from the audience, and I can see that we have received some already, so I will move straight onto the Q&A now. So, Dr. Smith, your first question today is, you talked a lot about foundation models, large language models being a subset of that. And there is certainly a lot of talk about how these tools can add value to businesses in the industry. Outside of the examples that you provided, how do you envision generative AI accelerating drug discovery more generally?
Yeah, that's a great question. Beyond the early stage work of using foundation models for therapeutics that I described, I think there are several things. And again, I was talking about using it in the context of target discovery, generation of new small molecules and biologics. And those are really important examples of augmented or AI-enabled drug design. And there's huge potential there for acceleration, which is why it's such a strong area of focus for us. But again, there are other things. And what would that include? Drug discovery generally requires working with vast amounts of data. So to handle this, some companies are looking for something like an AI-powered research assistant where they can ask complex questions, receive prompts on discovery, clinical questions, utilizing all the knowledge that they have in-house, also, of course, leveraging knowledge that exists externally in the public domain. So you could imagine combining large language models with growth engines to get more exact responses and pull information out of that more quickly and efficiently from that data. Another thing that generative AI has helped us reimagine is how to boost general productivity at the enterprise level. And I of course, touched on that. This includes ways of increasing individual productivity, leveraging large language models with organizational data and workflows, creating synthetic data as a source of complementary analysis, informing study design. These are just a few examples that companies are working on in the space that have expressed to us. But with the rapid growth and exploration of generative AI, I'm certain others will surface here as well.
That was an incredible answer. Thank you so much, Josh. I'm going to move on quickly to your next question today, which is, what do you see as the key opportunities and challenges that implementing these AI technologies can offer?
So addressing first key opportunities, I think that at least part of the value and opportunity lay in holistic end-to-end acceleration across work streams. You're right, you're only as fast as your slowest bottleneck. So identifying and providing technology that really addresses each bottleneck, each pain point in the workflow of the end user in this case being the scientist, the researcher, the developer. This really frees them up from the information technology concerns so that they can focus on the actual science to be done, right? Every scientist shouldn't have to become an AI expert to use AI in the same way that, we don't have to be AI experts to use ChatGPT, for example. And at present, this process within drug discovery is very far from automated and very far from something that can be executed without the user having to think a lot about the underlying technology in most cases. So, I believe that there's opportunity for both technology providers and consumers, and that lay in enabling and having access to technological frameworks, not just cutting edge AI and machine learning models, but also harnessing hybrid cloud capabilities and heterogeneous infrastructure compute all the technologies I've mentioned, the quantum, et cetera, and wrapping that around particular use cases where the users can bring their own data, their own domain context, even algorithms and models and tools that they've developed to bear. And I think that's where the opportunity and value lie. This is something that we're aspiring to achieve with Watson X. As far as challenges of implementing AI, one big challenge is how you access and handle sensitive data and create a technological framework that has this kind of flexibility. The general purpose AI, quantum, and cloud solutions that I described in the context of supercharging the scientific method, for example, is one effort to achieve this. You can find out more about that again at accelerate.science. But as I've also described, there's domain-specific AI in the area of drug discovery as well. That's a part of that story, where it is infused into everything from target identification to post-approval and market. And that said, we're already seeing how AI is helping to achieve acceleration on several fronts within this flow, together with partners, particularly on the therapeutic side, right? So drug repurposing, finding new molecular entities, improving safety and efficacy, et cetera. Just very quickly, one other big challenge, of course, is building the right foundation models. And as I've described, it takes a lot of data and governance to build a foundation model with that's trustworthy and has the multimodal representations that you want, that you can then tap into for the many discovery tasks in the biomedical space that are downstream. And this is something that we're working on, as others are as well, of course. So it's certainly very exciting and a very active area of exploration right now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. That was another excellent and incredibly well-detailed answer. We still have time for a few more questions today. So your next question is, you spoke about technology as a solution to problems within drug discovery. How important do you believe partnerships are in this respect?
That's a great question. Invaluable. I guess that's the short answer. Partnerships, both small and large, and open communities of discovery will play a critical role in the evolution of technology. One thing for sure is that progress really can't be made fast enough in silos. Ultimately, it's technology married with domain expertise that drives acceleration. Industry partners help harden and validate new technology in real-world settings, and their insight is, of course, invaluable. But on a grander scale, I believe, again, that open source communities have and will continue to be crucial in regard. I didn't have a chance to touch on this during my talk, but this is a major reason why IBM is such a strong advocate for open science communities. In fact, back at SciPy 2022, about a year ago, we announced together with NumFocus an open source science initiative that really convenes developers and the best of the open source community together with scientists who bring the method and rigor of science. And there's a rapidly growing list of partners who actually have embraced this vision and joined that community. And why did we do this? Well, science has always driven technology, yet over the past couple of decades, technology has advanced so quickly. And at the same time, science has become so complex, distributed, and challenging that these worlds now they're out of sync. So this is really an aspiration to convene these two great community efforts of the modern era, bringing together scientists and technology developers to drive a new open era of science. Beyond that, of course, I mentioned, Cleveland Clinic and some of the things that we're doing there. On the industry side, as one quick example, you saw that, Moderna is applying IBM's foundation models to predict potential mRNA, medicines in the context of, what we're doing with Watson X. They're one of a growing number of critical partners in this space that's really embracing foundation models and the technology to accelerate the process of discovery. So, as I mentioned at the outset of my response, I believe we believe in our DNA that partnerships are an invaluable ingredient for achieving accelerated discovery, particularly for these more complex problems like drug discovery.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. And we have time for just one final question today, which is, are you hopeful that with the continued adoption of AI technologies, we will see new breakthroughs being made within the field of drug discovery? And what would this mean for both researchers and patients?
Absolutely, yeah. I really think it's a matter of when, not if, for more integrated adoption of AI in drug discovery and development. And as always, I think it will be breakthroughs validated by early adopters that will convince others. They're always the ones with the most urgency, right? The ones who recognize a huge pain point in their own workflows and are really hungry for an alternative to speed things up. And I think, ultimately, as I said in my talk, the ability to create AI models like generative AI to simplify a scientific task at scale for a reasonable investment and much more quickly is what's ultimately going to make a difference for them. Solid demonstrations of this, I think, will make converts of the larger community, I think. What does this mean for researchers and patients? Um, for researchers, I think it means faster, cheaper solutions in a fraction of the time. Similar to what I showed in the acceleration examples that condense time and cost of solutions by about a factor of about 10x. For patients, I think that translates to more targeted, personalized medicine at a lower cost. And I think that perhaps we could all agree that that's a world that we'd all like to live in.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. But unfortunately, that is all that we have time for today. But it's been an absolute pleasure to have you present with us, and we really, really do appreciate your time today. Any questions that we didn't have time to get to will be sent to the speaker after the event. And as with all the other talks in the event, this talk will now be available to view whenever you want for the next 30 days. That just leaves me to say thank you once again, Dr. Joshua Smith, and we will be back soon with the next talk.